So he is right now serving as Director AI Products and Platforms Data Science for Subex. He was earlier working as an associate principal for AI products, platforms, and IoT. Before that, he was also associated with Virtuosa, where he was handling a big team. In the Before that, he was working for MU Sigma as manager for advanced analytics and product management. In the beginning of his career, I think he started with Siemens, and then he joined Larsen and Toubro. So a lot of experience, but the best point is that Abhinav has got enormous amount of experience as far as this data science stuff goes. And really like to thank you, Abhinav, for joining us.
And thanks for inviting me for this session, right? It is always a pleasure to share the personal anecdotes about the field that you're working in, or about your own experiences, which will help the people to grow in their own life or in their own career. There goes in a days that which says that there's no better sight of when you leave a person successful or happy in his own sphere of life, right? There's nothing better than doing that, right? So it's always a pleasure to kind of interact with the young budding engineers, or say professionals, early graduates, early professionals, who have that kind of fire in their gut to make a mark in the industry, right? So always happy to help that kind of engineers. So it is my own pleasure, right? I like doing that.
Yeah. So, I will start from the very beginning, because
Sure.
most of the people, once they see some successful guy or some guy who is doing good inside the industry, they feel that he has been a lucky one. But, they usually forget the kind of hard work that goes behind, and, a number of setbacks, failures, and still, carrying yourself forward. Tell us in brief about your childhood. How was it? A typical middle class, and what were the problems that you faced in the beginning of your, childhood?
Okay, sure. So that's an interesting question. See, I had also my fair share of, say, troubles early on, or the hardships in the life, like everyone else, right? I'm not unique in that, right? In that sense, right? It's not that only in India. I'm the only one who has to face those kind of hardships in life early on, but and no one else, because see, in India typically, where a large section of our population belongs in that strata of, say, middle class, or lower middle class, where people are aspirational, and they want to grow, and they face a lot amount of hardship in their own lives in some or the other way, right? And but they are trying to navigate through those challenges. They are trying to find a way for themselves to create a meaningful impact in their life, right? Somebody has said that life is not about, say, pursuit of power or happiness. It's about, life is all about the search of the meaning, right? So the similar story goes with me, right? So in the initial, the biggest setback that I had in my life is when I was, say, in seventh standard, and I lost my father in a car accident, and it had a great impact on me, right? It was a very hard time for all of us, right? For my family, for me, my mother, and my sister, right? And but all kudos to my mother, and the kind of strength and charisma and the personality she is, and the power she exudes, and how she has helped us to kind of steer through these challenging times, right? But these challenging times has also taught me, and my little sister, how to because whenever the life throws you certain kind of challenges, right? You will have to figure it out. There's no point in kind of blaming others or blaming the situation, because that is not going to help you, as you can understand, right? So you will have to kind of find your way out of such kind of situation. I was my father was working in Tripco, right? And he was an engineer production there. And I was like any other township kid who has not seen beyond the ambit of the township. I have not even lived in proper cities, and I was not even aware about the challenges that a proper living in a city, or a kind of a open world throws at you, right? But the thing is that once you life gives you that kind of shock, right? You find your own self, right? And slowly and steadily, something struck me overnight, and I wanted to prove to the world, right? That see, even if after this setback, I have that thing in me, right? To chart out my work career and to explore the new frontier. So slowly and steadily, also the because of the and I have been extremely competitive from my early days. So I have been a topper in 10th, 12th, even in my engineering days, right? The same feat I also kind of again repeated it. I am Lucknow, right? But the thing is, and currently in the other endeavors that I'm going into, whether it is a PhD study or I will do that for sure, and nobody can stop me. If I've decided to go launch onto something, there's nothing stopping me, right? From non-IT to IT world, I have also successfully transitioned. So I think those kind of setbacks in life, but you also have the so when you have the support of your family members or the other mentors, that helps you a lot. So so that is the only one major setback. The rest of the things are minor setback. I don't even count these kind of things, right? There's no point kind of going over those small things in my life, but that is only one thing that that has some had a that jolted me from within, right? So yeah, so that is all about, yeah, that is one anecdote that I talk about freely with others as well, right?
So, during your childhood, any one particular mentor except your mother, whom you remember, who actually, created a huge impact on your personality?
Okay, so there have been many mentors. So I will start off with one personality who kind of has the highest amount of influence on me, and he is my grandfather, my Nanaji, right? So why I will tell you, he was a man of charisma and excellence himself, right? He was the head of the zoology and botany division in a very big university, and he was a very erudite man, very well-read man, and he had command over multiple subjects, and the kind of passion that he exuded, and the kind of passion that he had to make an impact for the society, to impart that learnings for to the other students of his, right? Or to all his kins, is something that I have rarely seen in any other professor or any other person who is trying to, who has had that kind of teaching style, right? So given my inquisitive nature, right, I used to go to university during my childhood, or even when I was in, say, 10th or in the 10th standard, till 10th standard, I used to go till the zoology labs and see people doing their own stuff, right? You might have seen them dissecting the frog, or the kind of experiments that we used to do in the biology laboratory, right? And he used to always explain me, right? So I remember an anecdote that kind of struck him, right? So if you remember, if you might recall from your 11th and 12th days, right? Before Carlos Linnaeus introduced a binomial nomenclature, wherein the organisms were identified by their first name, that is genus and their species. Before that, there was a polynomial nomenclature, right? So because I read something, because before that there were 6 to 7 words that used to describe a particular entity. So for example, a red algae that grows on the bottom of the rock in the ocean was described as Sexatilis follis germanius umbilitis coriambis. So that kind of interaction that I had with Nanaji, these kind of things, and he was surprised by the kind of he was also, so whenever he saw potential in a kid, right, he always liked to groom that kind of a potential, and that is something which I also look for whenever I work with my also subordinates or some of the colleagues of mine, right? So whenever you see the potential, you would like to groom it. In addition to my Nanaji, I would say that I have been fortunate enough to work with many of the managers all across my career, whether it is has been Siemens, where I started my career at, right, as a turbine calculation engineer, and as a utility analytics engineer, where I got a chance to apply what I've learned in the thermodynamics and rotor dynamics, or as a mechanical engineer. So by the way, I'm not a computer science graduate, I'm a mechanical engineer. And so that did not stop me from kind of coming in the data science industry and to dominate it, right? So nothing is impossible. So, and also
And sorry to interrupt you, Abhinav. You were the topper in mechanical engineering as well. I just saw that, you have got more than 95% marks inside your mechanical engineering.
yeah, in the terms of pointer, it was 3.94 on 4. Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah, in the percentage term, it was 72.3, right? Correct. So it was also a fascinating journey, right? So what I'm trying to get at is that I have been fortunate enough to work with very good managers as well, whether it was Siemens, whether it was L&T MHPS turbine generators, where I got to work with two fabulous managers. My line manager himself is a kind of a charismatic person, or a person from whom you can learn a lot, right? He came from a G, and he had himself a good pedigree, right? So, and similarly in Mu Sigma, my fulfillment unit leader was really great. I had learned a thing or two from him, especially about the leadership, his leadership traits, right? How to care about the people whom you work with, right? How to groom them, how to help them out in the when they are in the time of distress, right? Today people are chasing numbers, right? They are as Simon Sinek says, you are always thinking about numbers to hit, and a bonus you get. So this is a kind of dopamine driven world, right? Where that human aspect of has been taken away from the people. Are referred to as resources, man, and FTs, which is a sad part, right? You are working with a living human being. We shall never forget that, right? So that is something which I always keep in mind when I'm interacting with my colleagues, right? One should never forget those who treat people as resources or FTs, the same kind of treatment they will receive from the other end, right? So on the other hand, when I progress when I climbed further echelons in my career, especially in the Virtusa, where I reported to my director of the AI and ML labs, which goes by the name X Labs. He is himself an IIT Kharagpur, IIM Ahmedabad fellow, extremely sharp fellow. I learned a lot of things about how to do a consultative high touch selling, right? So I have learned. I see. I'm a non-stop learner. I like to learn new things. So even if I see something good in you that which is worthy of emulation, I will shamelessly copy that, right? Even if I have to do that, right? So I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, right? And I say that, and I follow that guy for not only the kind of mission he's on to, right? But also the kind of the way he conducts himself. It is simply mind blowing and awe inspiring. So follow these kind of if you find enough people to inspire you, you will end up inspiring many more people. So that is what my life funda has been. Yeah. So I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely, Abhinav. It always answers my question.
Okay.
It's always a pleasure talking to you. Acha, Abhinav, so I will give you the stage. You know, what we want to hear from you is that somebody who is trying to make a career in data science,
Sure.
how he or she should start with, and what should be the path like, and what is the importance of mentorship in that?
Sure. So I will here I will like to spend my a lot of amount of my time, because I think the audiences or people who might be watching this live feed, they might have come for this segment alone, right? So now, as all of us know, right, the data is the new oil, right? And people are trying to leverage the tremendous amount of the petabytes, zettabytes of data that the firms are sitting on, or the individuals sitting on. They are trying to unleash the potential out of this data, right? And that is the why we see the data science has become the sexiest job of the 21st century, right? Now, because see, AI is a very wide field, and AI has many pillars to it, right? So AI is all about making machines work or think in the way the humans, all of us do, right? To replicate the cognitive abilities of the human, right? So whether it is a computer vision problem, or whether it is a speech recognition problem, whether it is a natural language processing problem, or natural language query problem, or a machine learning problem, all falls under the ambit of AI, and the broader umbrella term of AI, right? Today I would like to talk about just one area in specific, and I would like people to throw their questions at me, and try to learn more about that particular area, which goes by the name augmented analytics, right? So augmented analytics is a term which was coined in 2017 by Gartner, which is the use of AI and ML technologies across the entire data value chain, right? Please understand that AI, ML, NLP, NLQ, or data analytics or big data, whatever the technologies that you might have heard about, right? These are all enablers in getting to the end outcome. What is the end outcome that you are trying to achieve? is that you are trying to create value and the business impact, right? So augmented analytics has kind of promulgated that construct, right? It is the use of these enabling technologies, AI, machine learning, NLP, NLQ, across the entire data value chain. And what is that data value chain? Is that it starts from data engineering. It has a data science in the middle of that piece, or that value chain, and DevOps towards the end. Now let us talk about each of these pieces one by one, right? So what does data engineering mean, right? So data engineering is basically is concerned with collating or curating data from multiple sources. It can be your normal simple file. So all of us are used to working on Excels, right? Though it is a practice which cannot scale, right? So you work with the data in Excel sheet, or say Word file. But companies work with the data which is in the big databases, right? Which can be a SQL database, or the structured database, a structured database, right? Or a NoSQL database which hosts non-structured data. It can be a real-time streaming data. So this is a streaming data, right? So whether it is a video data, or it is a, say, live text data, or a web related data, right? So there are kind of streaming data that also comes in. Then you have also which are consumed through real-time messaging systems like, say, Kafka, ActiveMQ, RabbitMQ. Then there are IoT protocols, with the IoT devices kind of exploding, and by 2022 it is anticipated that the number of IoT devices, that the connected devices that we will be living in, will be more than 50 billion devices, right? So getting the data from the IoT devices, and similarly so many data sources, right? You get the data from multiple different data sources, do some extract that data, do certain basic transformation or advanced transformations on the top of that data, and move it to a certain centralized repository, which is called what? Either it is called a data lake today, or it can be a data warehouse. It can be a new age paradigm or constructs like feature stores, right? Feature stores are the new evolving construct like that of data fabrics or the data hubs. It's like I always like to give this corollary of supply chains, right? Because it is easier to relate to that, right? So like that of physical supply chain, today we have decisions on the data value chain, right? So the stores move from the various stages, right? From a raw material stage to intermediate semi-processed stage to final finished stage, where it is dispatched to its end users, right? Through last mile connectivity, or through other dispersal mechanism, right? Here the same goes with the data. You have to get the data from various different sources, do certain cleansing or basic transformations on the top of the data, certain data enrichment, and store it in the data warehouse to make it amenable for consumption downstream, where it can be used by citizen data scientists or other applications to consume it, right? Now there are different technologies which are in the data engineering area, right? So Apache ecosystems provides you with, say, Apache NiFi, Apache Airflow, Luigi, Beam, Flink. For batch data processing, you have the options like Scoop, Flume. For streaming data, Spark has become something, a dominating force in the industry, right? So this is the first part of that data value chain. You are getting the data, you are massaging the data in a certain fashion, and moving it to a centralized repository, right? Now come to the second part, which is the data science, right? Now once you have moved the data into, say, centralized locations like data warehouse, I will not go into the details of the other thing. Now you intend to consume that data and do certain activities further on the top of it, on that master data, what we call, right? So for that, it can be a rule based system, wherein you are making use of certain rules to take certain actions or decisions, or it can be a machine learning based systems, which are probabilistic systems, which are not deterministic system, wherein you are trying to learn from the data itself, right? You want to make certain predictions, you want to prescribe certain actions using your data. For example, if I'm Airtel or Jio, right? I would like to know which of the consumers are using my data the most, right? Who are my top percentile or quantile of consumers, right? What are the offers that I can give to these kind of consumers, from whom I can make more money, which we measure by what is something called customer lifetime value, CLTV, right? In this way, now once you have stored the data, massaged it, and it is in a right shape and form, now throws immense possibilities to be able to push it downline in the terms of extracting insights out of that data, and that you can do using the deterministic system, which are rule based system, or the probabilistic system, which are machine learning based system, right? So this is the second piece of it, data science, which is in, I think, which has become a fancy term these days, right? And the third is the DevOps. That is the third piece in the third piece in the stack of the data value chain, where it is how to operationalize these insights, right? So for example, some model has given you predictions, right? So these are through your recommendation engine, you are getting a recommendation, right? So these are the customers that you shall try to pitch to this kind of product. Or through your churn management system, you got to know these are the customers which have high propensity to churn or move out of your network, so offer them something so that you can retain them on their network, right? But insights only if not converted into actions, right? Or if it is not converted into something meaningful, it is of no use, right? So now comes the third and very vital piece, which is called either solution ops or DevOps, right? So it is about consuming those insights which is coming from either deterministic system or probabilistic system. So how you can do that? For that you have BI tools, right? Business intelligence tools like that of you must have heard about Tableau, ClickView, Power BI, Sisense, and then there are new age tools like ThoughtSpot and Sisense, which are doing fantabulous job with the BI, right? You can do it through NLQ based business insights and narrative. That is to understand in the human language form, right? Some insights that is thrown at you, right? So that before you even read and try to make sense out of the charts or the kind of the ED or the exploratory data analysis related stuff, you get the machine is telling you through natural language generation NLG technology, that these are the kind of templatized insights for you for your consumption. Or you can do it through the case management capabilities, right? In the DevOps, wherein this all the insights that are kind of trigger will trigger certain cases for investigation that you have to take to its logical conclusion, right? Also see, I don't intend to go into the CI/CD or the nitty-gritty of the DevOps. The idea is to tell you this, right? Even in the stack of data science, you have and then see, technology options are too many these days, right? So for example, in the data science, I keep on hearing whether to work with Python, or now upcoming languages like Julia, or whether it shall be with SAS. What is the future of SAS with Python and R? Kind of the disruption or the community engagement that we are seeing on the top of these languages or the libraries that are upcoming these days on Python, right? Also, so the thing is this: you have to it's not about the programming language that you master, right? It is about the problem solving. You shall have that attitude of problem solving, and you should be very clear on your fundamentals. For example, if you launch into a data science without having proper fundamentals on stats, mathematics, which are or linear algebra and calculus, then you will not be able to make sense of what that model is doing, right? So if the fundamentals are in place, trust me, this I am talking from my personal experience, you will be able to master any language. Today it is Python, right? Python and R. Tomorrow it will be Julia, or tomorrow it can be say Elixir and Go. So though they are not used extensively for machine learning, or even for that matter Java, but yeah, these are the prominent technology or tool stack of your choice in data science. Similarly, when it comes to rule based decisioning systems, then you have Apache Beam, Flink, and various other technologies that you can explore there, right? Samza. So these are the again or other or Java Spring Boot. Also, these are the technology stack which are used in the backend for the creation of these kind of rule-based systems, right? And for again on the BI stack, I've already talked about certain tools and technologies, and there are various other open source tools and technology options to explore, right? Which I can cover in my subsequent discussions when I will cover every pillar of this data value chain that I talked about. So definitely data is the new oil, and you can make your career in any of these pillars that I've talked about. And but you have to be very good at it, right? So whether you decide to make a career in the first phase of the data value chain, whether it is data engineering, whether it is data science or rule-based modeling, or whether it is solution ops piece that I talked about, right? Solution operationalization, which will include BI or business story designer. it's just keep one thing in mind, that you have to be very good at it, right? Because there's an adage, right, that all of us are born into genius, but sadly most of us die in mediocrity, right? There's no place for mediocres in any of the any business, right? If you are exceptional and if you are even good at it, right, you will be revered as a professional. And trust me on this, being an industry professional, I'm telling you from the facts, or the ground reality from the bottom of my heart, right? It is not it is not a mantra, that is something which is not I think not known to you, right? So try to be a T-shaped professional, right? Try to gain depth in one area, whether it is a data engineering, data science, or any other technologies or tool, or any other thing that you want to excel in the area of emerging tech, right? Which includes also API microservices. If the future can be also quantum computing, right? And I think IBM or Google so soon will make it happen. They have already make certain taken long strides in that direction, right? So the thing is that just be yourself first, identify your area of passion, and be very good at what you do, right? If you do just do these two or three simple things, I'm sure you will excel at anything, right? So yeah, this is how this is what my advice. If people have any specific questions, I will be more than happy to answer.
So that was quite descriptive, Abhinav. So I think I think these people, will have to start from the very beginning, and will have to go block by block.
Right.
So even if they are thinking that they can understand it in one go, it will be very difficult. But
Right.
the good thing is that Abhinav is connected with us, and has actually uh, Abhinav has actually he has actually agreed to help us, mentor you, guide you, if you are willing to take up this path, because as he told, he is always there to help us out. And trust me, guys, whenever I face some sort of a problem while analyzing some sort of data, although I'm not from his field, but he's the guy who will pick up the call even at 11 o'clock at night, and will actually help me with that. So this is the kind of a mentor that you need in your life, and this is the kind of guidance that you need. And if you have that, you can achieve it, achieve anything. So we will rather move into a little bit into your personal domain as well, because
Sure.
because behind all this professional success in this small time, and so I'm touching wood for this, because we really want you to grow as much as possible, and we'll be more than proud for that.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, so especially for the startups, what I have seen is that they do a lot of market research, but
Mhm.
but how to make sure that the market research with these startup companies do while designing their product, that data can be trusted. How can we make sure that the data which they are collecting through market research can be trusted?
Sure. So that's a very great question, right? So let me talk about from my own personal experiences again. How, because I have been into multiple products in both B2C and B2B domains, right? Primarily into B2B domains, right? Like the products like AI experimentation platform or current platform that we are building in the area of augmented analytics, right? Or other AI or emerging tech related products that I also build in past, right? So whenever I look at the data, right, the only data that I trust personally is the data that I crunch myself through primary research, right? You understand the difference between the primary and the secondary research, right? But all the time you don't have the wherewithal or the resources to kind of engage into primary research. So the best way to do a kind of a secondary research is not to go by one source. First of all, I look into the more prominent. So see, there are primary marketing research firms, right? Like that of Gartner, Forrester, or Analysis Mason, and there are many other companies which are, or markets, right? Say an Indian firm, right? So there are many other firms which are now into the business of the market research, right? So when you go through their reports and see what is the method that they have followed for collating or collecting or synthesizing certain insights from that data, right? You get a sense of if you have that kind of which comes by the virtue of experience. if you have that inkling whether what they are prescribing or what they are presenting to you is something which is based on ground reality or the hard research, or it is just something based on talking to a few fellows and taking their number, taking their views, because there are certain marketing research firms which are doing it, right? So they talk to few fellows, they don't know concept of sampling, which is very important, and then to kind of extend the inferences that they make on sample to the larger population, right? So first of all, first and foremost, I only trust those firms which have made certain name in the market and which are known for their primary research, like Gartner and Forresters, right? And then besides this, there are other firms. There's no harm in going through or reading their reports, right? But you shall always do this activity with the caution, right? Because see, so for example, when I was trying to estimate the market for augmented analytics, right? I will give you from very practical examples, right? So how you can go about this job? There is a top-down approach or the bottom-up approach, right? So as augmented analytics is all about the market, which is a combination of multiple markets. You have event streaming platforms in the market, right? Or which are also called the data ops or the data integration platform. You have data wrangling platforms like that of Trifacta, Alteryx, Paxata in the market, right? Which also belongs to the category of the augmented analytics. It is also mapped there, right? So you have the data science platform or the auto ML platforms like H2.ai, Data Robots, or the solutions like Data Domino Data Labs, right? You have vertical SaaS AI solutions which also provide certain kind of augmented analytics for certain part of the value chain, right? So this is a kind of bottoms up evaluation. If you look at through your own research, right? If you are able to say corroborate the numbers that you are seeing in certain non so trustworthy data sources, you will be able to triangulate these kind of records, right? So never forget that God has bestowed us with a lot of capability to do a lot of crunching by ourselves, right? You have in today's era, nobody can cry or whine, right, that I don't have the data sets at my disposal. You have umpteen data sources at your disposal, right, to be able to corroborate or validate to a certain extent a proxy validation of what is being thrown at you, right? So this is one way of looking at it, right? Or a bottoms of this was a top down or a bottoms up approach, or there can be a top down approach as well, wherein you try to see the parallel data science or AI ML platforms market, right, or the similar construct market, and try to what we something do in the method of relative valuation. In the world of finance, if you are right, you have a one discounted cash flow valuation, which is again based on the primary. It is something akin to your primary research, right? You have the knowledge about the cash flows and the future cash flows, right, and the terminal value of the business, and you calculate certain hurdle rate, right? And now with that calculation, you are able to fix a number. Yeah, this is the value of the company based on solid numbers. Though that kind of evaluation is now elusive in the world of startups, where it is the business of finding one fool who will one fool or the another, right, who will help you exit out of the kind of mind-boggling evaluations that we see in the market today. That is my personal belief, that is based on bubble. Now in relative valuation, what we do, we go by the proxies, right, on the basis of the subscriber base or the other numbers of multiples, right? We try to correlate if this is a similar sized company with a similar nature of the business and all, and we try to put a number to it. So this is a kind of a corroboration or a triangulation when we are doing a relative valuation. Same goes with the market research. Yeah, so yeah, that is my viewpoint. Never trust anything blindly. Use all the neuron power that God has bestowed you with, right? And and try to always remain as close as possible to primary research. But when you are going for the secondary research data, go for some trustworthy sources which have a good name in the market, right? That will help you to kind of solve this paradox of the for finding the right vendors for the market research. Yeah.
So we've got one question. Sumer asks, like, how can a person with less technical comfort in dealing with data learn and practice data science effectively? What is the best way to start from basics?
I think Sumer, thanks for that question, and that's a brilliant question. So see, as I was saying, right, technology is just an enabler. You shall not start from technology itself. So there's no need to have any kind of prior knowledge in say Python, data science. I will come to that part. But before you have asked a very right question. So somebody who's not very say tech savvy, how he can make data science his careers, AI, ML, or data science as his career, right? So think about this. At the end of the day, we are solving problem for the business enterprises, right? We are trying to create, tap into the value of the data, and want to create insights that will help organizations to thrive and excel in the current VUCA world. VUCA is the kind of world that we are living in, right? It is replete with volatility and uncertainty and things like that, right? So always go by the fundamental first principles of the problem solving. What is that? The 7 steps of the problem solving, right? First, if you formulate the problem correctly, right? So suppose you have been thrown a problem at you. I don't know at what stage you are in, so whether you are an early professional or say early graduate, right? But whether you are an early graduate and early professional does not matter, or even an experienced professional. Always go by the fundamentals of problem solving, right? Define the problem correctly, right? Think about all the variables that are there interacting with each other in that problem. So for example, if I'm trying to solve a very simple churn management problem, right? If I formulate the problem correctly, so what I'm trying to predict, okay, the customers who have high propensity to churn out of my network, right? What are the variables that can go into it? So some demographic profile of the customers, or their transaction history, or their the data which is lying with my call centers, right? Because when the customer is in trouble, he will call my call center, right? And register his problem. So there are a lot of data points with you. Now you want to build a classification model. Again, this is the technical part. You are trying to build a classification model to identify which customer amongst my customer base has high propensity to churn, right? But again, look, till now we have not even talked about say Python, Java, or any other technology stack, right? You are structuring the problem well. If you define the problem well, half of the job is consider it done, right? Then select the right set of variables to in that problem space. Always remember, it is not about the individual variables, it is about the interaction effect of the various variables in that ecosystem. So always have that ecosystem thinking kind of approach, right? That will help you to define the problem holistically, right? What is the next step? Think about all the alternatives and the solutions, right? What is the best innovative way? So you always come up with the options, yeah, all alternatives, right? To solve that given problem at hand, because because there are various ways to go towards the end destination, right? And you try to find the shortest path or the smartest way to solve that problem, right? Similar to the electricity, right? You can learn from the current that it always try to find the least resistance path, right? So you come up with various set of options. You do a prudent comparative assessment between all these set of options. You identify the best solution that is going to work, and you deploy that solution in production, and that works, and that gives the say the benefit to the firm in the terms of say ROI, the kind of investment that you have made, you are making more out of it, right? So yeah, so always start first strengthen your problem solving skills, right? For that there are a lot of books that I can mention to you, but 7 steps of problem solving, and there is a case study book by McKinsey and firm, right? Or the art of problem solving, what we used to call in Mu Sigma, right? So there are various books that you can go through. So the first, get this thing in place, right? Secondly, somewhere down the lines, once you have that knack for problem solving, as I was saying, AI and ML is just an enabling technology. Try to strengthen your concept in the areas of stats, right? Because this is one arena, right, wherein you'll have to be strong at statistics, mathematics. Also, down the line, you can learn upskill in the area of choose any one language. Like Python is easy to learn as compared to the because it is a very I'm from a mechanical engineering background, and over the years I've excelled in in the tools like Python and R, right? And only few years back so for past 4 years I have learned SAS, and I'm using it, right? So it's not, see, learning tool stack is not difficult at all, right? If you have that kind of inclination and passion to learn it, right? But first, gets the basics in place, right? So master the art of problem solving, strengthen your competencies in the area of stats, basic mathematics, right? Like linear algebra, calculus. Try to and try to relate it to the real life problems, right? So the entire AI and ML world, right, can be divided into the 5 classes of problem solving, right? Mostly you will either see regression problems, classification problem, time series based problem, right? Or it is an anomaly detection related problem or recommendation system problem, or there's one more class of problem which is called linear and non-linear optimization class of the problem. More than 96% of the problems or the business problems in the world can be classified into this 6 to 7 categories that I've talked about, right? So I would say first take baby steps in the terms of understanding regression and classification problems, and then expand your competencies in the other arenas as well, right? I will try to cover each of the classes of problems in my next subsequent these kind of discussions, so that you get an insight into how to go about acing each of the problem category that I talked about, right? So, but yeah, the final in nutshell, I would like to say 2 3 things. Again, a master the art of problem solving, 7 steps of problem solving, because that doesn't change whether you are using AI, ML, blockchain, or whatever technology that anyone throws at you. Second, bolster your competencies in the areas of mathematics and stats, which is the fundamental for learning for machine learning. Choose one of the languages in the so start experimenting with Python. And in the future, when you want to aspire to be a thought leader in that area, I will tell you the ways to do it, like going through the research papers or things like that. So yeah, this is my answer, Sumit. I hope that answered your question.
But I've got a small question from my end.
Sure.
Many a times, what actually happens is that, let us suppose, a guy who is 25 or 26 or 27 years old, who has already
Right.
had 4 or 5 years of experience inside a particular industry. He wants to get into data science now, so he has
Okay.
developed a lot of interest in that, and he has started
Right.
doing some courses, finding out mentors like you, talking to them. But once he appears for the interview, what happens is that the person on the other side usually ask, like, since you don't have any experience beforehand working in a corporate setup on a data science problem, I cannot take you. And this is where he feels stuck. Like, how should I go get into that domain? Your suggestions on that?
So this is a really great question, Rishikesh, and this is one problem that the early mostly this is not problem for early engineers. This is for early professionals, right? Or not early graduates don't face this problem. So say out of the engineering colleges or your say other colleges, if you are directly taken, because people from all spheres of life are coming into data science, right? It is not something. Yeah, mostly we see the engineers because engineers have kind of have dominated that space for quite some time. But it is not. I know certain great data scientists who are not engineers, but who have mastered the craft of data science, right? So, but what problem that you have described is a very practical problem that needs to be solved in industry, right? And most of the calls that I get from the people are in this category only, right? So they are already 5 to 6 years. They already have 5 to 6 years of experience. So they might be marketing professional or supply chain professional, and they are already working in certain domain. It can be a banking, healthcare, energy and utilities, oil and gas, or it does not matter, right? Whatever domain that they are in, right? And they don't have the skills, the right kind of skills to be hired for either for a data science job or a AIML job or as a machine learning engineer, or they even after kind of upskilling through the various programs in the market, right? Though there are certain problem with that programs which are not making you industry ready, right? So with these kind of programs, they gain certain knowledge, and on the piggybacking on those programs, they try to get into the or try to make that career shift, right? But then they're faced with a problem because they have never kind of worked with any of the practical problem in the industry, right? As you were describing or delineating. So they have not worked with any practical problem. They have not even hands-on work with any creating any machine learning model or deploying it in production in these environment, or see it perform, right? Because there are again or or would have just academic kind of orientation that these kind of programs that give it to them now. So that is a big challenge. In fact, many of the people give up on their initial phases when they face a lot of rejections in these kind of interview, right? So my suggestion to that, these kind of early professionals, especially the early professionals who don't want to kind of sacrifice the 5 to 6 years of experience that they carry, right, and they want to capitalize further on the top of it and want to climb further echelons in their career, is this, right? You have worked for 5 to 6 years, right? You come up with a domain knowledge which is something, what you have learned is also very very good, and something, if you have really worked hard for those 5 to 6 years, trust me, the kind of domain knowledge that in that particular sphere, so for example, I come from energy and utilities and power background, right? Today also, I can claim that I know the turbine calculation or the rotor dynamics better than my peers in energy and utilities or the power industry. So and that confidence I have because I have done a lot of hard work in that arena, right? So the thing is that the kind of knowledge that you have accrued over a period of time, or you have gained over a period of time, that is a very strong domain knowledge, right? Now try to create a portfolio aligned to that domain, right, where you have worked in. So for example, if I worked in energy and utilities industries, right, I will try to after going through these careers or courses, I will try to create a portfolio of my own on the platforms like GitHub, right, wherein with the data set I will create certain models, I will show them working, right, and I will show that this is the handsome work that I have done in say past 1 year or so, on my own, right? Even if you have not, if you have not given by the chance by the industry to excel in that particular area, once you have created that certain portfolio on say GitHub or on the write your own pieces on Medium or the other Medium is a very very important arena where you can write your pieces. You can try to write or publish your articles in Analytic Vidya or Data Science Central, right? With that you will get a kind of visibility that is not that is an organic way of growing your visibility, right? Without paying anything, even a single penny to anyone, right? So that these are the ways in which you can make yourself visible even though you don't have any experience on your side, right? Once you do that, right, take a try to capitalize on the opportunity that comes your way on the basis of the hard work that you have done. Try to make use of domain knowledge to create your portfolio. Try to publish something which will help you gain visibility in these kind of mediums, Medium being one just one medium where you can publish your blogs or thoughts, or try to publish a white paper if you have the time and of course time and that kind of no, I would not say acumen but passion for doing that, right? Even better if you want to which is an expensive affair, I will not prescribe that way. Try to publish a patent or some IP, right? Try to work on some IP with some collaborating with others, right? This will give you a kind of credence which will be difficult for even the good recruiters to deny. When they will look at your awesome portfolio, right, they will be totally bewildered by the work you have done, and definitely, and trust me on that, whether you have come up with any practical experience or not, you will be definitely considered for an early data science role. But then mellow down your expectations. Don't think that you will be hired as a senior data scientist from the day one, right? Start your career as a data scientist or an associate data scientist, and through your own work try to grow up in your career, right? One of the ways to learn, because this is all about learning, right? uh, Try to follow the good research papers in journals, so top A category journals, and especially the research which is being done in 2 or 3 sources that I'm going to talk about. First is the arXiv, where you have multiple papers published on AI and machine learning, or in multiple fields, but these are, so Facebook research is one, Google research is one, right? NVIDIA research is one, right? So in your area of interest, whether it can be machine learning, it can be natural language processing, it can be natural language query, right? It can be natural language generation, it can be computer vision, it can be speech synthesis, it can be sentiment analysis, be it anything, it can be anomaly detection, it can be recommendation engine. You can master anything that you decide to master. It's up to you, right? Start learning, even so try to learn new things from these research paper. Try to implement that in your own notebooks, right? So you might be working with any SDK. It can be Jupyter notebook, it can be Netflix Polynode, it can be PyCharm. Try to do something on your own, and you will learn by doing, right? So that is the best way to learn, Rishikesh. And there is one quote that I have made for myself, right? See, life is a triangular arbitrage between three things, right? what you learn, what you apply, and what you create, right? So there has to be a balance between these three nodes of a triangle. If you learn something and if you don't apply, it is of no use, right? If you learn something and apply it, but still you are not creating something of value, right? Which is new, or which is over and above what is already existing, you are not adding any additional value in that sense. You are just kind of following certain things which have already existed. We as a mankind has have progress because of the innovation that has been done, right? So innovation is equally important. So again, life is a triangular arbitrage between these three nodes of a triangle: learn, apply, and create. If you strike balances between all the three nodes of this triangle, nobody can stop you. You will become a force to be reckoned with.
So it is learn, apply,
And create very vital.
and create. Yes, I'm going to paste it on my whiteboard. Abhinav, thanks for giving me that.
Pleasure.
Okay, so we have got another good question out here from Sumer itself. He's asking, if I want to make a career in operations and supply chain management, what are the prerequisites by most of the companies in terms of
In
data
the
science
terms of
knowledge?
data science knowledge, okay, so again, Sumer, there is a no prerequisites in the say supply chain or logistics on this kind of in the areas of operations that you're talking about, right? So I think if you already work in something, say if you're already worked in the manufacturing industry, something which is very close to supply chain management, right? Whether it can be a job of inventory management, or you have worked in the order management or purchase section. I don't know your professional background, I'm just making certain assumptions. If you have that kind of domain knowledge, right, that is the most vital knowledge asset that you have, right? Again, as I'm saying, machine learning is something which you can learn through under the proper guidance, or on your own as well, right? But in the proper guidance, you will get a charted path how to kind of hit those milestone and try to shape your career in a certain way, right? So the thing is this: if you already working in the supply chain domain, right, or in the area of operations, and the knowledge that you have kind of accrued over a period of time, right, that is a very vital knowledge that you have, right? So just making a guess, say if you are working with, say so I have worked in the L&T, I have also I've been exposed to multiple value chains in multiple industries, right? So if I talk from my personal experience, I have worked in seven domains, to be specific. I worked in BFSI, healthcare, energy and utilities, oil and gas, metals and mining, and now telecom as well. And now next month I'm stepping into the domain of fintech, right, and the payments domain, and also with in the retail business as well, right? And I have worked in pretty much everything. It is AI, ML, or RPA led asset and IP creation, wherein I have created products and platforms. I have done big data analytics, right? Strategic and emerging tech strategy consulting, and strategic and risk management. So in the terms of operations, right, from inquiry to order and order to remittance, the cycle that you see in operations, right, I have seen that entire value chain in certain two or three industries, complete value chain, right? So I would say this, right, leverage on the Sumit, leverage on your past experience that you have, right, in the operations or the supply chain arena. Try to and say start working on two or three specific problems, right? Again, I am giving emphasis on portfolio creation. So see where AI and ML is being used in supply chain, in umpteen number of things, whether it is a location planning, see linear and non-linear optimization. Optimization is a big problem in supply chain, right? So there are specific libraries and the tools like Gurabi, Suplex, which are for the solving the optimization or the inventory problem in the supply chain, right? So work on the KPI SKU rationalization problem, inventory rationalization problem, right? Bottleneck, if you have read this book, Theory of Constraint, right? So most of the RPA problems are also, in a way, you will not you will be kind of amazed that most of the automation work I have done, right, and which have delivered value, right, in the industry, it was nothing but a supply problem, right? Because see, if you are doing an automation which is upstream of the bottleneck, you are not going to achieve anything, right? So read this one book on Theory of Constraint, right? And you will learn a lot about a different perspective on the supply chain, right? So again, create your portfolio, work on certain specific problem that I talked about, and start learning one of the languages, right? Assuming that you have already say a background in stats or maths, I'm not sure about that. So once you have done that, polish your skill in that area. Start working on, create a small. It's not necessary that you work with millions and billions of data, right? Start small, and make it big. Start with a simple data. Try to understand that problem, right? And and feel free to reach out to me. I will give you certain problem sets to work on, right? And then I will direct you towards certain resources as well, wherein you can learn on certain supply chain problem, right? And that will help you in your career. I hope that answers, Sumit.
Guys, you can keep on asking your questions because we'll keep on taking that. Okay, so Abhinav, for the time, we have got another question from Siddharth. He has asked, can a competitive programmer be a good data scientist?
Absolutely, why not? In fact, you have a head start in that sense, right? If you have a competitive programmer, Siddharth, say assuming that you are a good Java programmer, or I don't know whether you have kind of whether you are proficient on front end stack or a back end stack or a middleware. I don't know. Assuming certain background that say suppose you are very strong in C++ or object oriented programming, and you are very strong with data structure and algorithm. In fact, you have that kind of edge in that sense, right? You learning Python is going to be a cakewalk, right? Imagine I am not a I initially in the initial days, I especially during my time at Siemens, right? uh, I was not a programmer myself. I was into the programming of turbine and doing the turbine heat and mass balance calculations on the heat and mass balance diagram, designing the turbine flow path, and these kind of though it is very much more evolved and complex job, right? Even more hard than programming. I can vouch for that, right? That is some certain aspirational job for a mechanical engineer. But I had that kind of programming mindset from the early on in my career, right? Because of the kind of experience that I have had, right? So can a competitive programmer become a great data scientist? Absolutely yes, right? But don't forget your basics, right? First, again, excel the art of problem solving. First, try to understand what is being asked and what problems that you are solving. Devise the best efficient way through that 7 steps of problem solving to attack that problem. Strengthen your concepts in maths, stats, and then programming is just an enabler. You are just trying to implement that what you have already thought through in your mind, right? You have a structured approach for problem solving. Now you are implementing the same in whether it is Python, whether it is R, whether it is Julia. It doesn't matter, right? You are just trying to implement that at scale, right? That matters in the current industries. So we are trying to solve a problem where we are dealing with the terabytes and petabytes of data, right? So that is not something which can be solved in your Excel, right? That is something not also scalable, right? So definitely, Siddharth, be positive. You can be a very great data scientist, right? And if you face any hurdle in your career, I'm here to help you out, right? So feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so moving a bit away from this technical discussion, will
Right.
would really want you to, because yesterday as I was talking, you have led a team of a number of people, coming from IITs and different colleges as well. How difficult it was, not difficult in the sense of actually handling them, but how important is actually people management skills once you start occupying some sort of a leadership place inside the organization?
See, people management skill is very vital. In fact, but see, in a way, I have been lucky also, and in the sense that I have always I have got the chance to work with very bright and the innovative minds in my during my career. So whether it was my stint at say L&T MHPS where I was assistant manager and I had a very small team, to my jump to Mu Sigma where I had a good number of team members to manage, and the kind of team that I was given, right? These were just young engineers, say just out of the college or early professionals who are there to make a mark in their career, right? They ask questions. They were inquisitive minds who are on a mission to do something for themselves, right? So it is always a pleasure to work with these kind of fellows, right? And people management is definitely when you are working with such kind of brilliant lot, right? Which is not a lot which takes the things on its face value or believe what you are just saying because you are their boss or you hold a certain position in hierarchy. That is not going to work in today's organization, right? Today we have very flat structure and open door policy in most of the organizations, and the organizations which promote this kind of working are only going to thrive in the future, right? So people's management skills is I think believe is very important, right? And it is hard as well. So though I think you mentioned it inadvertently, but it is also hard to work with the people who are really, who questions you all the time, right? Hard in the sense that it is not only hard, but it is also equally exciting, right? Because you also learn a lot from them, right? You might not have thought about so attacking a problem in a certain way that they might come up with, right? These bright young minds, whether it has been IITian, IITians that I work with, or NITians, or even for that matter from the after a point in time, college also, your pedigree does not matter. If you don't, if you are not delivering value to the organization, right, that tag is going to help you only in getting your first opportunity. But if you are not doing anything of substance in the industry, you will be shown the door. You will be shown the door, and I have myself shown the door to such people many a times, right? But I've also groomed equally who's willing to learn. So if you will see, just having a tag and throwing tantrums around in the today's organization is not going to work. But if you are really humble, and if you have your feet on the ground, and if you want to really make a mark in the industry, everybody will kind of not everybody, but people will try to embrace with you with the with their arms wide open, right? But having said that, there are certain people in leadership, right, especially in the IT industry, what I've observed, or for that matter in the non-IT industry, who get petrified of the talent, right? They, instead of
Yes.
kind of embracing that kind of talent, because see, always there's one policy of hiring that I've learned from my manager at Batusa, right? Always try to hire a person who is at least good in one area in which you are not good at, right? Or who excels in one area or knows a lot better in one specialized arena. So for example, if I looking for a data scientist, and somebody, I'm not a computer vision specialist, so if I'm hiring a computer vision specialist for a certain kind of job in my team, he will be a tremendous value add in my team, right? So don't get petrified by the talent, right? Effectively manage them. So what are the ways that I follow myself? First, try to learn their aspirations and try to help them design their career as per their aspirations, right? In that way you will gain mutual respect, right? Also lead by doing, right? Just don't talk or throw statements in the air. Always lead by doing things, right? Showing them the way, or proposing certain solution, doing certain hard work, or try to add value to them in the the way you can do, right? So I used to take sessions for my fellow colleagues, and I have done this in multiple organizations. I always try them to guide toward the right set of resources, or I take sessions personally, I arranged for the cross collaboration session between different teams so that they can learn from each other, right? If you cater to their aspirations of this millennials, or especially the generation next, or this generation next, right, they will stick with you. And if they feel that they are growing and they are learning, so this is what they desire, right? You cannot just hold them by money, or by just showing them the position. They have a different set of aspirations, right? They have a different set of attitude when they come to work, and most of them that I've worked with are really good people who want to create something of value in the industry. So yeah, cater to their aspiration properly and help them design their career in a certain fashion, right? If you try to boss around them, it's not gonna work. In fact, then you will be shown the door by the organization, because you will fail as a leader. Such leaders are sheer failure in the organization, who just try to boss around without first contributing anything of the value, or who just try to by the virtue of their position, try to exert their influence on their subordinates and colleagues. That is not going to work in today's world, right? And that kind of leadership, you will see these kind of leaders being thrown away from the upper hierarchy, or they will be sooner or later shown the door, right? And rightly so.
That was so true. And you know, Abhinav, when you were speaking, you actually reminded me of my previous boss. So
Okay.
I loved one thing about him, Abhinav. Like, you know, he in the beginning, you know, first 1 month, he just devoted his time to find out what excites me. And
Okay.
from the second month, he started giving, you know, the works in a way which was actually, you know, making me feel very proud of myself. This is what I realized after 1 year.
Okay.
and
Okay.
and he made sure that the entire productivity, what I'm capable of doing is being utilized in the best way possible. And this is what,
Okay.
once you're telling that, this actually reminded me of him, right? Where, this is what great leaders actually do. They don't make you realize,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely. They try to, they don't never handhold you, right? So that is also very rightly said, right? Then they will never literally handhold you and give you all the resources. See, we all also have to be frugal with resources. You don't have unlimited resources, whether it is time. I don't have unlimited time to spare, right, with people. I don't have, nobody has unlimited time, money, or the any kind of resources, right? But they will make sure that they are not intimidating you. They will enable you to do certain things which will help you to excel in your career, right? But they will never literally handhold you, right? So very rightly said, Rishikesh, right?
so, I will move on to the next question.
Sure.
One thing which we have seen amongst the young generation is that they have started taking failures as something which, which actually stops them from achieving success.
Right.
So, how do these people handle failures, and how have you handled failures and setbacks in your life?
Okay. Okay. That's a great question. So again, so the thing is, you shall never be afraid of failures, right? Failures are part and parcel of your life, right? There's no one, even the greatest of greats have their own fair share of failures. So whether it is the guys like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, right? Or even the guys like Mukesh Ambani or Adani, or say the great businessmen like or the ethical businessmen like Ratan Tata, or the other leaders, right? There might be other leaders that you might look up to in different business arenas, right? So I think there's no successful person who can claim that he has never experienced a failure, right? Don't get disheartened by failure, but also don't stop applying yourself when you experience a failure, right? But this is easier said than done, right? Mostly what happens is that though you are exerting yourself and you're trying to make the things work, sometimes it happens that you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, that you are working incessantly and you're not seeing the results coming up, and so some people somewhere down the line think of giving up, right? But don't do that ever in your life, right? Because see, life is replete with the kind of opportunities and the responsibilities, and especially in the today's arena, if one thing does not work out for you, find the other thing, right? And most importantly, try to find out what naturally excites you, right? Just because I am doing AI and ML or data science, see, I have not been doing data science from day one, right? Or I'm not in the field of AI ML or the emerging tech, like, so today if it excites me to explore, say, quantum computing, blockchain, I will do that. It's just because I like doing that, and I like kind of learning new technologies and applying it to solve business problems. So first and foremost, identify what works for you, right? What is something that excites you? It can be a simple things like, say, graphic designing, right? It can be things like say being an interior designer. See, there are many. If you're good at anything, right, you will prosper like anything. But if you're stuck as a mediocre in any field, it is not going to give the kind of ROI that you might have envisaged for yourself. So keep this vital points in mind. Just don't try to follow others because my colleague is doing something and he's getting a great return on this. I will also try to just replicate that, because even though if it is not of my liking, first identify the things that is of your liking, right? And when so for example, suppose the data science and AI is of your liking and you really love doing that, right? And you really get out of the bed in the morning to build machine learning models, if that is something that excites you, if that is the case, definitely venture out in that arena. But when you experience failures, when the things are not moving at the pace that you have envisioned for yourself, don't get disheartened. Sooner or later your hard work will pay off, but that will require a lot of things that I talked about, right? Briefly touched upon, like portfolio creation, creating the visibility of yourself organically, right? Or trying to connect with the network with the people who are working as data scientists, trying to learn from their anecdotes and experience. Try to get into the organizations like certain organizations like Mu Sigma, right? which is also willing to take those who don't have any background in programming, which is one good fact about Mu Sigma that I like, right? Even Virtusa, we had certain engineers, especially certain IITian fellows who are not from the computer science background, but the way they kind of upskilled, right? The way they learned it quickly in 3 to 6 months of time, and they started working on the industry problem is something which really amazed me, right? So if you have that kind of killing instinct in you, right, you can get it done, right? And don't be disheartened by failures. So if you are really passionate about it, you will get there, right? But if you are just doing it for as a lip service, and if you don't really mean to do that, you will never get there. And there is a saying by Theodore Roosevelt, not me, right, in this case. So it is far better to dare mighty things and to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they kind of live in a great twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat. You don't want to live in that kind of great twilight, right? Go out and excel there, right? You are born to dominate, right? And you will get there if you have that kind of killer instinct instinct in you. Go and just excel in the world, right? Don't be afraid of the failures.
So Abhinav, moving forward, that was quite inspirational, right? That actually, I'm going to write that Roosevelt wala on my whiteboard again for 2-3 days.
Okay.
So what is the importance of mentors, especially in your professional career? Because you were talking about portfolio building and all that stuff. Many a times, people who enter into the industry, they're not aware of it. Many a times, they are not even active on platforms like LinkedIn. So I remember one of my bosses telling me, like, why don't you write your experiences on LinkedIn? This will give you a lot of traction. People will learn about you.
Absolutely.
So what is the importance of having good mentors, especially in your professional life, who can actually tell you, or maybe if they're not telling you, maybe give you some sort of a feedbacks on what you are doing in your life.
Sure. So absolutely, mentors are really important, right? And anybody who's saying that he did not have any mentors, or somebody who has kind of helped him in kind of growing up the ladder in his career, he's just blatantly lying, I would say, right? You need such people, right, to guide you through certain problems that you might be facing, or some of the things that you might not be aware of, right? So what does mentors do? Please understand one very important facet of this. Mentors are not for giving you, say, technical gyan or hand holding you to making you learn everything from the scratch, right? What you should always what you should always look for in a mentor is try to learn from their perspectives, right? They have their own experience in the industry. They will talk about their own personal experience and anecdotes, something which is coming from their decades, or say multiple of decades of experience, right? When they talk from their own personal experience, and they share those anecdotal evidences with you, and they talk about their own insights, their own journey, right? Or how they have made what mistakes that they have made, what are the things that may have made them successful. You will learn a lot of things. The same goes for the area of AI and machine learning. So the things like portfolio building, or writing patents or white papers. So let me tell about one mentor that I really admire from the bottom of my heart, right? So one is he's not directly my mentor. One is Elon Musk, right, who has the maximum number of patents for probably in the world, right, and who has open sourced those kind of patents for the benefit of everyone. And the second is one of my colleague. His name is Rahul Kharath, right, and he's currently a senior management management consultant with IBM, and he's in one of their practices, and he's leading the AI and ML initiatives there. That guy has 15 patents to his name, right? Can you imagine? That is the kind of people that you look up to, right? And when I used to talk to him, and he has helped me a lot in kind of in my journey of, say, writing patents, or creating these IP and artifacts, right? So everywhere in your career, yeah, you will come across people who will inspire you in some or the other way, right? Don't look for fallacies in the people, look for qualities in the people. When you start looking for the qualities in the people, you will be able to spot those qualities, right? And it is up to you whether you want to emulate it for yourself, or whether you want to kind of adopt a version of itself, but in a different tweaked way, right? So mentors have a very, very vital role to play. I cannot emphasize it enough, right? So definitely, I have been fortunate enough to work with not only managers, but those who are not even directly managing you, right? So, but even the person that I talked about, right? He is always willing to help others and help them grow in their careers. People in my own group walk up to him and discuss their problems with him, right? Just like we also discuss amongst ourselves about the certain cutting edge problem that we are trying to solve. So mentors are everywhere, right? So mentors are your manager can be your mentor, your colleague can be your mentor, right? So if you have that eye to spot qualities in the people, anybody and everybody can be your mentor, right? Simon Sinek doesn't know he's my mentor, but he is my mentor for public speaking. Just by looking at him, I have kind of got to know a lot about public speaking than attending any seminars or sessions, right? Just go and have a look at some of the TED talks that that person has done, right? And you will. I am a big fan of that guy. He's not even aware that he's my mentor, right? So as I'm saying, right, if you have that kind of fire in you, right, if you're willing to learn and if you're willing to grow, nothing can stop you. Nothing. There's no, you are only limited by the limits that you put on yourself, right? If I'd say today I don't know anything about, say, in detail, in the kind of depth that I have gained in, say, AI ML or other technology stack, or in the other fields, I today don't have that kind of depth in blockchain quantum computing. But if I decide to go into that arena, right, there's I can challenge the best in the business, right? Within 1 or next 2 years, if I totally apply myself into that business, right, I will give the run. I will give them run for their money, right? So that is up to you, right? Start spotting qualities in the people, start learning from them, and never be afraid of failures, right? And always look up to certain mentors who will help you to fast track or structure your growth in a certain manner, right? So these are my final 2 cents, Rishikesh.
Yeah. So, from this entire talk, one thing which I have, taken out, which is very important for me also to learn is you are consistently talking about the learning agility part. Like how
Right,
important is learning agility, to develop your professional career.
right. Absolutely. So, see, you are a continuous learner, right? You are a continuous explorer. So, whether it is a spiritual guru, right, who talks about going inside you to explore the what is the potential of your soul and from where you came into being, to a business guru, right, who talks about unraveling the potential or chartering the uncharted domains or territories. Learning is something which has to be it is a continuum, right? It is not a process which stops anywhere, right? You can be a lifelong learner, right? You can learn from simple nature tells you a lot of things, right? In fact, there's a stream of science which is dedicated to what is called biomimicry, because many of the systems, like the cars which are being high speed cars which are being designed, the kind of contours of which is being inspired by some kind of say the animals or the birds, or the kind of see the aerodynamic profiling of those these cars, right? So if you have that, again, if you have eye for that, to learn new things, you can learn from nature, you can learn from your peers, you can learn from your boss, you can learn from your parents, anybody, right? And never stop learning, never stop upskilling, right? Because upskilling is very vital in today's time, right? If you don't upskill, then you will become obsolete, right? It's like if you stop learning, you stop growing, as simple as that, right? Because things are changing at a very rapid pace. We are in the era of technology, where technology is leading the disruption as an enabler, right? Never stop learning, be it technology, be it business, be it anything that you like, right? Keep on reading. Reading is very vital part of being successful, right? Any successful man that you can put your finger on must have read at least thousands or hundreds of books in his lifetime, right? Because books gives you a kind of perspective, right? And read different kind of things. It's not only that, read fiction, read non-fiction, right? Read science fiction or whatever you like, right? Learn from the perspective of these great thinkers and doers, like Nicholas Taleb, Salman Khurshid, and all the great George Orwell. And there are so many great authors, right, who have put it there on who have put everything. Daniel Kahneman, Think Fast and Slow. These are, see, so these are the gems, right, which needs you need to tap into, right. Everything is out there for you to tap into, but it's up to you. If you it's like ज्ञान की गंगा बह रही है, अगर आप उसमें हाथ धोना चाहते हैं तो आप धो सकते हैं, but if you don't indulge in that, nobody is going to do that for you, right. हमेशा प्यासा कुएं के पास आता है, कुआं प्यासे के पास नहीं जाएगा, ये सबको समझना होगा. दैट इज वेरी वाइटल, राइट. And so I think, right, the one I also actively do shairi, and that is one of my say inclination, and something I indulge into. And I'm also writing a book or collection of shairis of my own, and from certain great poets and shairs, right. So so there is a shairi, right. I'm not able to recall the exact creator ki है गुरूर समंदर को खुद पर बहुत है, गुरूर समंदर को खुद पर बहुत, मेरी प्यास से जो वो उलझे तो उसकी धज्जियां उड़ जाएं. So there is a ocean to be fathomed, right. So if you have that kind of thirst, right, if you're hungry to get something in the world, right, whether it is knowledge, whether it is a certain position, it can be anything, you will get there. Nobody can stop you. There's no force in the world that can stop you. There's only one thing which can stop you, that is you.
That is so right, Abhinav. Acha, Abhinav, like, what are some of the important things that you look into a candidate once you are interviewing him for your team? Like, some of the important traits which you look for.
Absolutely, I look for just one trait: ability to get the things done, get the shit done. Those who don't say no, or who kind of try to regurgitate the problems, or just mince about the problems. Those who are very good at bringing who talks about solutions, right, who talk about how to solve this problem, rather than victims always recite the problems, winners always come up with solution, right. So I don't look for someone who has a very great technical skills for the day one. I don't care if you are mastered Python R, or Scala, or for that matter Julia, right. That will definitely add to your portfolio. But if you don't have that knack for problem solving, and if you're not a good problem solver, and if you just go by textbook definitions of solving problem, right, if you don't come up with innovative ways of solving a problem, or the way you attack a problem, this is what I look at. And that attitude of getting the shit done, what we call in the industry, get the things done, don't recite the problems, come up with solution. So I look for the people who have that ability to get the things done. That's it. That's very simple question.
Yeah. And so we have got one question coming from Abhishek. Abhishek is asking, sir, having good programming knowledge is necessary for being stable in IT industry. He's asking,
So, yeah,
whether to survive.
having a good programming knowledge is definitely something, an add-on, right. So be a try to be a T-shaped professional. Always try to gain a depth in one area. So for example, let us assume that you are a very good backend developer, right. But if you are aspirational, and if you want to further kind of enhance your skill set, try to also learn a thing or two about, say, front end technology stack like Angular, React. If you are a good in, say, Java, Node, PHP, and if you want to also grow your competence in the middleware stack, or go downstream. I talked about the entire data value chain, right. If instead of data engineering you want to excel in data science, try to learn about try to get into statistics, for further bolster your competencies in mathematics. Try to excel in just one programming language, because this is an enabler, right. So definitely, if you are a good programmer, and if you can write good programs, right, to solve the problems at scale, and in the most efficient manners, right, I think those who can write programs efficiently, right, which can serve in the low latency applications. So for example, most of the highly paid programmers that I've seen is in the, say, algorithmic trading industry, right, wherein good C++ developers are paid handsomely, right, for writing programs for the low latency applications, very memory optimized, or with a very light footprint, which are able to run with ultra low latency, right. So mediocre programmers, don't be a mediocre programmer. That's my only message or mantra, right. If you're a good programmer, exceptional programmer, then you are going to be a very successful person, right? And they never give that knack of problem solving. See, these technologies, whether it is Python, Java, Angular, React, these are just ways of solving problem, right? You are trying, try to think of, uh, whether you are a good React or Angular JS developer from a front end perspective, that does not matter. If you have that penchant for creating the best user interface or user experience, that is where something which will give you an edge, right? If you're penchant for further improving the performance or the latency of the, so what the task that you have been given, if you deliver that extra delta, right, what you have been asked for. So suppose you have been given certain tasks, and these are the end outcomes that you are trying to achieve. If you deliver that one extra thing, right, which nobody else even thinks or talks about, that will give you an edge, right? Because there are very less people who think about innovative ways of problem solving and applying themselves more over the problem, right? Most of the people are very happy in their comfort zone, right? And they don't want to move out of their comfort zone. Good for them. So that is a personal choice that you can make, right? Then don't have that aspiration of growing up the echelons and or the climbing up the ladder, right? You will be there and you will be serving, you will be helping others to grow up the ladder, right? So keep doing that, and there is nothing stopping you. But if you want to excel, which you, every single person has that potential to excel. I am a true believer in the potential of the people that I work with and the people who are out there, right? It's just something kind of, you need to rekindle that fire, right, which is lying within. And if you have rekindled that fire, you can that entity will become an unstoppable force.
And so from where is this all this enormous amount of self confidence? Won't say self confidence, but self belief, which seems to be very much lacking inside in a number of youngsters
Okay.
to whom I actually talk to. How is this possible? One way is that you actually work very hard for attaining that knowledge, and once you start working hard, you gain that kind of a confidence. This is one thing. The second thing, maybe you have got a good mentor who actually gives you feedbacks on your whatever mistakes that you are actually doing or something like this. But tell us something about how to maintain that self belief, because I will tell you, I have met three guys
Right.
in my life in the past 1 year, who were trying their level best to do something in one field, and
Right.
since they failed there, and now they have lost all hopes. And now whatever I
Yeah,
tell them,
I agree.
they are not ready to listen to that. They're like, sir, we are failures, we cannot move ahead now.
Sure, sure. So first of all, you talked about working hard, right? I would say not only work hard, work smart. See, even donkeys work hard, but they are not successful, right? They carry the, so who works harder than a donkey, right? But the donkeys are not successful, right? The thing is this, right? The see from where this kind of self confidence manifests in any other individual or the successful person that you talk to, right? I don't even see, I have a lot of things to achieve in my life still pending, right? I will keep on learning, that there's nothing stopping my learning journey, and I have much more aspirations. So in midterm, when I say midterm, in 3 to 5 years, I aspire to be a CEO, right? The very short term goal is to be a chief product officer, which I'm on the verge of achieving, right? But my midterm goal is to be so I'm a one step away, I would say, from being a chief executive officer at a mid-sized firm, and a leap of faith away from my penultimate goal of starting something of my own and making it big in the industry, right? So the thing is this, from where the self-confidence come from, you cannot fake it. The thing is that unless you learn and imbibe certain traits in you, right, and you keep and you learn, if you don't learn by doing yourself, right, you will never get a self-confidence. And people can see that something, if it is fake, or they will be they will be easy to poke holes into it, right? So don't try to fake it, right? Just try to learn and learn and learn and never stop, and try to excel in one arena, right? And learn and keep on learning. See, even if you learn, so I was talking about learning from the top notch artifacts, say from top category A journals, or research papers, white papers, patents, or the different solutions or the thought leaders in that particular space, right? If you keep on adding only one new thing every single week, then you can imagine you have added your knowledge artifact or repository. You have added 52 things in an year, right? And 52 good things, incisive things that can make a difference for you. That is what matters, not the mundane things, right? So that is what matters, Rishi. So I think there are certain antecedents to confidence, and that is that comes from your smart work and from the work that you have done, and you have proved yourself. As I said, right, life is a triangular arbitrage between three things: what you learn, what you apply, and what you create. If you keep on if you keep these three nodes of triangle intact and make it an equilateral triangle, right, then you are all set up, you are setting yourself up for the success, and that is how the confidence manifests. And other kind of confidence, which I say overconfidence, or the people who keep on throwing tantrums, right, without knowing anything, or having an iota of knowledge about that space, right. I loathe is a very strong word. I pity them, I would say, right? Because they are not fooling anybody else. You will be fooling yourself. If I don't see something, if I don't know something, and if I don't have that humble attitude in me to learn that, right, then you are the biggest fool on the planet Earth, right? You can have the tag, and you can keep roaming around and keep hoping for success, and success will always elude you, right? Second point, I think that you are mentioning, so especially the people who get disheartened, right? See, everybody has their ups and downs. There was a time also when I was feeling low. I was thinking, what is the way to shape my career, how to grow in my career, right? What are the tracks that I intend to go on to, right? How to, so but I never stopped learning, I never stopped doing, right? So don't give that hope, right? You never know what is lying on the other side of the tunnel for you, right? So you might be you will be amazed at the possibility that life has, right? But that only requires you to do one thing: never give up. Because if you give up, nobody else is going to help you. Just try to seek help. Try to I will be more than happy to help any of the individual who is feeling so disheartened, right? There's no better thing to do to make someone take someone grief or share a burden out of as you were also doing, right, when you were trying to talk to them, right? And also set themselves up for the success, right? That is what we everybody, if we all of us do that, this simple thing, wouldn't this world be a wonderful place to live in? So let's follow that simple mantra, right? Let's help these kind of people who have that kind of grief, and try to help them. And it's up to them again. They will have to surmount that thing and come out of that grief, and just be there to excel in the world, right, in the area of their life.
So, guys, feel free to take help, but don't lose hope, because there are a number of people around the world who are there to help you out, who can leave all their tasks just to help you out, because they understand humanity in a far better way. And this help is something which actually lasts longer, because right now, if Anubhav has helped me, do a number of things in my life. Abhinav has actually helped me do a number of things in my life. He's helped me with some of my company projects, how to analyze the data and all that stuff. So obviously, this is something which actually goes forward. So try to get help, try to contact people. Don't feel disheartened just because, two guys actually told that, they are not going to help you, because there are a number of people who will always be there to help you out. And reach out to Abhinav anytime, and he's accessible over LinkedIn. So I have posted his LinkedIn profile inside the description. And trust me, this was one of the best sessions that we ever had, since the time we started 2 months back. And
Thank you so much.
this actually makes me feel, so confident about myself, because once I see people like you, once I meet people like you, and I have my boss with me as well, who was my previous boss. Once I see all these people like you, around me, I really feel that the corporate world is not somewhere, where you don't get help. You just have to find out the right person who can actually help you
Absolutely.
steer
Absolutely.
your
Second. Absolutely. And I would like to end this session by just one simple share again, right? कि गजब की एकता देखी है मैंने इस जमाने में, जिंदों को गिराने में और मुर्दों को उठाने में, right? So don't belong to that second category of people. Whenever you get the chance to mentor or even extend that helping hand, right? Do that, right? And because that other people, because if you enable somebody to excel in his or her life, right? That will return to you multifold, right? I am doing well in the career, I think, because of some of the good blessings and the wishes of that I've also accrued over a period of time, because that is I think that is my biggest wealth, right, I would say. So if anybody who is listening in and who is feeling disheartened and he wants to reach out to me, and if he's feeling facing any certain problem in his career, and if he wants any kind of guidance in any humble way in which I can help you with, I will be more than happy to do that. Thank you so much. Thanks for taking out your valuable time to listen to me, right?
Thank you, Abhinav, and we will be in touch, and we will have this session again maybe next week, where we will be talking more about the data science stuff. Yes.
Okay, sure. I will help in the AI ML data science, and I will talk about, as I said, right. I will talk about each and every area in details and depth, right. And then I'm also thinking about designing a session, right, which will be the industry first session, which will be a combination of primary market research, fundamentals, plus econometrics, and plus the data science, which none of the other programs, right. Whether it is I will not like to mention their names, right. You know all the kind of programs that are running in parallel on the data science, right. But I will offer you a kind of program with on the real industry data sets, right, which can be a combination of all these three, right, and which will help you excel in your career, right. So that is one of the my way of kind of helping other people to grow in their own respective avenues, right, especially in the area of AI and ML and data science, right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abhinav. Thanks a lot, and thank you for taking out your time.
Thank you. Bye. God
and
bless.
Take care. You have got a session again, I think.
Sure. Thank you. Bye. Take care.